I now recognize the distinguished gentlewoman from New York, Representative Ocasio-Cortez, for 5 minutes.
The gentlewoman is recognized.
And I thank the great representative from St. Louis, Ms. Bush, for yielding her time. I rise today to speak against H.R. 347, the quote-unquote REIN in Inflation Act. And I'll start my remarks today by saying how ironic it is that we spent, and Republicans spent, the entire first week of this session entangled in a fight in order for them to get the votes to secure a Speaker of the House. And the whole crux of that entanglement was, and part of it, was rules to maintain regular order in the House. Rules to maintain regular order. Because just as we go back to Schoolhouse Rock, you introduce a bill, it's supposed to go to committee, you get a markup on that committee, a hearing in that committee, a vote in that committee, and if that bill can survive a committee vote, it comes right here to the floor of this House. And we spent a whole week tied up in the beginning of this term trying to reassert that order. And then, today, one of the first acts that we have from this oversight committee is to subvert that, because perhaps they knew that this would not survive their own committee. And so it goes straight to the floor for a vote, subverting all of those arguments that Republicans were making about restoring order to this House. But let's get into the substance of this bill. Ironically, if they had gone into this order, if they had gone through regular order, they may have caught that this bill does nothing to rein in inflation, in part because in their haste to put it together, my colleagues on the other side of the aisle committed an incredibly basic drafting error that makes this bill completely unenforceable. Even if we agreed on their ends, the haste and the rush to put this together and skip committee has created a drafting error that doesn't even make this bill enforceable. But even putting that error aside, my colleagues and I seem to have wildly different definitions of what actually is considered inflationary. While Republicans have labeled virtually any federal spending during the pandemic as inflationary, while railing against the child tax credit that helped babies continue to be fed and diapers on their bottoms, that help families stitch things together, while they've railed against the eviction moratoriums and the Paycheck Protection Act, Moody's Analytics found that the American Rescue Plan prevented this country from slipping into a double-digit recession. Because of the American Rescue Plan and the actual Inflation Reduction Act that Democrats passed last year, our country's inflation rate is now lower than in the UK, Canada, and 20 other European Union member states. Yet Republicans have introduced legislation to repeal the Inflation Reduction Act, which would immediately raise the price of insulin along with other critical prescription drugs. Tell me how that is fighting inflation when they're proposing to raise the costs of prescriptions. Not only did Republicans vote to raise prices on prescription drugs, but they also voted against measures to drive down the price of gasoline last year. Last year, Democrats presented a bill to penalize companies who were price gouging during the middle of Putin's war on Ukraine. My colleagues on the other side of the aisle voted against that too. So which one is it? Republicans have controlled this body for almost 2 months and have not passed a single bill that would actually address inflation or cut costs from working families. But you know what Democrats did? In January, we capped the price of insulin at $35 so that everyday working families can actually get a little bit more ahead. And we have a lot more to go. But we don't even see a carefulness and a thoughtfulness from the other side of the aisle to even draft the language in this bill properly. It's not even ready for a vote. So why should we? And for that reason, I urge my colleagues to vote no on the so-called REIN in Inflation Act. And with that, I yield to the distinguished gentlewoman of St. Louis, Cori Bush.
I reserve.